Welcome to Read Poems Every Day. I'm in my campus office. It's incredibly hot in Vermilion, South Dakota, and I just kind of want to read poems today. So I probably will keep this short, read the poems of the day on Poetry Foundation and Poetry Daily. I might say a little bit about what might occur to me when reading them, when trying to read them out loud, especially if I trip up a little bit. I have not practiced these, so this is a bit of an experiment to see what happens. So this is Poetry Foundation Poem of the Day. This is Ianu Ulawa Adenle's What My Mornings Look Like off Meds. Um, I don't think I want to read it on this spot. I want to kind of go to the poems page. The poem actually is very new, appears in the July-August issue of Poetry this year, 2026. Let's scroll down. Let's click Read More, and then we'll read Adenle's poem together. What My Mornings Look Like off Meds. Here we go. Morning after morning, the earth buffers in wait for the rising of the sun. So I've already kind of slipped up a little bit. Morning after morning, the earth buffers in wait for the rising of the sun. My waiting exhale is really a lamentation as I turn to water the lily plant, the snake plant, and the cactus. It is a miracle they're still green, sprouting new leaves and spikes. My intentions as delicate as the irony that hides its crooked hands. Sometimes the body of the water is not a body of water. Sometimes the body of water is not a body of water. It is the miracle of being almost consumed. Often I have wandered into my kitchen, observing the lily plant's habit of playing comatose, despite my daily waterings, at the rising of the sun. I fingered at the edge of the chewed-off plant endlessly. My heart is tender, my mouth is not. I have missed many miracles of my own mornings, just like the dishonest plant, sprouting new and green leaves when my hand is no longer heavy, the watering can abandoned, the risperidone worn off. It's a beautiful poem. Ianu Ulawa Adenle is a new poet to me, and I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. Um, Morning after morning. So I got a little tripped up here. I think I might have introduced a "the" when I first read this line. I really love the repetition of the second, not the second. Where is the, I thought there were at the rising of the sun. Yes, so here, rising of the sun, rising of the sun. We have that repetition there, daily waterings. Yeah. So it was just the repetition of this phrase for the rising of the sun. And you do have a repetition of that enjambment that tripped me up the first time. Morning after morning, the earth buffers in wait for the rising of the sun. Further down, despite my daily waterings at the rising of the sun. Okay. Another thing that stood out to me, that there's really no punctuation in the poem aside from apostrophes. You know, you have a possessive apostrophe there. You except here, which I thought was a little strange. As I turned to water the lily plant, comma, the snake plant, and the cactus. And here, you know, that comma is indicating a series of nouns and objects rather than a kind of turn to a dependent clause. Anytime a poem references a poetic figure, like irony or trope, whatever irony is, it does seem doubly important. Although, of course, the poet might not be invoking irony in its lyric sense or in its literary sense, maybe its situational sense. Um, Again, not sure I pronounced risperidone, sort of working off my my sense of how other medications are sometimes pronounced. Um, okay, well, let's check the other poem. Okay, so this is Missouri Pastoral 01, Missouri Pastoral 1 by Brooke Spalding. This is the poem of the day on Poetry Daily's website. Just scrolling through it, let's read it. Let's think about if how its play with space may or may not trip up an effort to read through it. Feature date July 20th, 2026, though this video might be going up a different day. Maybe not. Maybe it'll go up today. Okay. Missouri Pastoral 101. I'm angry when my neighbors roll slow and talk about God through the salt-caked minivan window. But I don't want to be mad about God because I know what they mean. All right, sorry, I was messing with my zoom in, so let's try that again. I'm angry when neighbors roll slow and talk about God through the salt-caked minivan window. But I don't want to be mad about God because I know what they mean. My compost pile thaws in Missouri. My husband and I talk about New York in the shower. It's nice to see a penis when you're giving up on your dreams together. Limp. Oh my, look at this. If this is enjambment, my gosh. All right, let's do this again. My compost pile thaws in Missouri. My husband and I talk about New York in the shower. It's nice to see a penis when you're giving up on your dreams together. Limp kale hangs, and I think about all the winter pruning I was supposed to do. Gosh, that's so good. I take out chicken bones from quartered legs, old jasmine rice, wet sliced potatoes. I like looking at the compost, at the pile of resurrection. The bread is blooming green mold. That's a sign of warmth. God is the feeling of momentum lying on the grass. Okay. I mean, you have the invocation of a age-old, ancient mode of lyric poetry, verse poetry, of literature, the pastoral. And so if I was taking notes and eventually getting to form and figures, I would have to maybe reckon with what the poem is doing with pastoral, but also locating it in a state in the United States of America, sort of right in the center of the country. Missouri, I don't know if it's right in the center, but it's a central state. I mean, such great sort of arrangement here. This repetition of the phrase about God, but feels different in its sort of location in the mouths of neighbors, but then as a sort of object of contemplation that the speaker is also sharing. Um, okay, I think I've already addressed why it's such an effective enjambment there. And it worked on me. It tripped me up. I had to kind of go back and keep going. And then this last two lines brings us back up here, right? Because there's a way in which this opening section seems to, set up the reflections on compost and showering and the work one is supposed to be doing. But then the poem is always putting things in relationship that are that you have to kind of wrestle with. But anyway, reading out loud, even despite the spatial arrangement, not too difficult to read out loud. The tricksy and funny in Jim and Tyr, but for the most part, even on first glance, I wondered a little bit exactly how this was to be read. It comes across pretty easily. Um, the sentences are very carefully controlled and signaled in ways that make sense. The use of spacing within a line, but then the use of a period. It's doing some interesting things, sort of going back and forth between spatial arrangement and punctuation in a way that's pretty different from Adenle's poem, which barely uses punctuation at all, um, and just kind of goes back and forth between lines flush with the left margin. Every even line is flush with the left margin. Every odd number line is indented until we get to the end here, at least in the way the poem is laid out here. Sometimes there's some difference between the layout of a poem on a web page and what it will look like when actually printed. And since I don't have the physical physical issue of poetry, I'm not sure exactly. But if you go visit this page, listen to this reading of the poem too, and think about how it might have differed from mine. This is a remarkable poem. I'm going to probably come back to this one not too long down the road. Um, and in some ways, it seems structured a little like a sonnet. And by that, I mean structured with a kind of turn at the end. You have, of course, the reference to medication in the title. And the whole poem is a kind of, not quite ekphrasis, but a kind of, in the spirit of ekphrasis, a kind of putting into words of a experience that is very visual, but also active. But then sort of that ending looping us back to and reminding us of the title itself. And the poem, of course, is sort of slipping and sliding with reference to, when are things just the things, and when do they take on sort of symbolic, figurative valences and connotations, and the sort of play of relation between the speaker and the plants and the water. Okay. All right, 13 minutes. Read 2 poems, both great poems, and really enjoyed reading them. And I'll be checking out the other work by Brooke Spalding and by Adenle. All right, folks. I'm still trying to work on how I want to sign off. You may have noticed if you've watched a few of these, I tend to ramble a bit here at the end, and I'm not entirely sure exactly how I want to do it. I did early on sort of just sign off by saying, let's read more poems tomorrow. So maybe I should just stick with that, right? So let's read more poems tomorrow.